At exactly 9:17 a.m. on January 22, 1943, a single American soldier lay hidden inside the shattered remains of a Japanese bunker on Guadalcanal. Second Lieutenant John George, 27 years old, watched a banyan tree nearly 240 yards away through a rifle scope that most of his fellow officers had laughed at for weeks. They had called it a toy. They had called it a mail-order sweetheart, and some had said it had no place in a real war. John George had 0 confirmed kills going into that morning, but in the previous 72 hours, Japanese snipers hidden in the Point Cruz groves had killed 14 American soldiers from the 132nd Infantry Regiment. Now it was George's turn. The rifle they didn't trust. George wasn't carrying the standard M1 Garand like everyone else. Instead, he had brought a Winchester Model 70, a civilian bolt-action rifle fitted with a Lyman Alaskan scope, a setup he had personally paid for using 2 years of National Guard salary. When the rifle finally arrived, months late, shipped through military mail, an armorer back in Tennessee had laughed and asked if it was meant for hunting deer. George calmly replied, "It's for the Japanese." The rifle weighed slightly less than the Garand, but it carried only 5 rounds and required working the bolt after every shot. To many officers, it looked outdated and impractical. Captain Morris, his superior, ordered him to leave it behind. George carried it anyway. A jungle full of eyes. By January 1943, Guadalcanal had already bled the Marines dry. Mount Austin had fallen only after weeks of brutal fighting, but the coastal jungle west of the Matanacao River remained deadly. There were no trenches, no bunkers, only massive trees, some over 90 feet tall, where Japanese snipers climbed before dawn and waited all day. They used scoped Arisaka rifles. They worked in pairs, and they knew the jungle better than anyone. Between January 19th and 21st, American patrols were ambushed again and again. Men were shot while filling canteens, killed from trees they had already passed twice. That night, George was summoned. The battalion commander had one question: can that rifle of yours actually hit anything? George listed his credentials calmly: Illinois state champion, youngest winner in state history, tight groups at extreme distances. The commander gave him one morning to prove it.
First shot, 9:17 a.m. At dawn, George slipped into the ruins of a captured bunker overlooking the coconut groves. He brought no spotter, no radio, only his rifle, a canteen, and ammunition. Through his 2.5 power scope, he scanned slowly, tree by tree, branch by branch. At 9:17, he saw movement. No wind, just a branch shifting unnaturally, 87 feet up. A shape resolved in the scope, a Japanese sniper facing east. George adjusted for wind, controlled his breathing, and squeezed the trigger. The rifle cracked. The sniper fell. 2 minutes, 2 bodies. George never looked away. Japanese snipers worked in pairs. At 9:43, he found the second man retreating down another tree. 1 shot, another body crashed through the branches. 2 shots, 2 kills. The jungle fell silent. The counterattack. At 11:21, a bullet smashed into the sandbags inches from George's head. The enemy had found him. He waited, let the shooter think he'd won. At 11:38, George spotted the third sniper, still in the same tree. A fatal mistake. 1 shot. By noon, 5 Japanese snipers were dead. The battalion stopped laughing. Rain, mortars, and adaptation. The next day began with tropical rain, perfect cover. At 9:12 a.m., George killed sniper number 6 from nearly 300 yards. Minutes later, Japanese mortars began walking in on his position. George ran just seconds before the bunker vanished in explosions. From a fallen tree farther north, he resumed the hunt. By evening, 8 snipers were dead. The trap. On January 24th, George changed positions again, this time to old Marine machine gun rocks. At 8:17, he spotted a sniper positioned unusually low in a palm tree. Too easy. Bait. George scanned wider and found the real sniper 91 feet up, watching the bait. George shot the decoy, then instantly swung and fired again. 2 shots, 2 more kills. Japanese machine gun fire ripped into the rocks moments later, but George was already gone.
The final sniper. That left one, the smartest one. George realized too late the final sniper wasn't in the trees. He was on the ground, crawling, using the jungle floor. The sniper moved toward George's previous position, methodical, patient. George waited, submerged in a shell crater filled with rainwater. At 10:03, the sniper reached the rocks, back turned. Still, George waited. Then he spotted a second Japanese soldier covering the area. It was a pair. George stayed motionless. At 10:13, both men moved, passing directly in front of him. George rose. 2 shots, 2 bodies. Escape. Moments later, infantry voices filled the jungle. George submerged again. They found his tracks. At 10:31, a soldier peered into the crater. George fired from the water. Then again. Then again. Outnumbered and nearly out of ammunition, George ran, bullets snapping past him, until he disappeared into the jungle. At 11:13, he reached the American lines. The result: in 4 days, 11 Japanese snipers killed, 12 rounds fired. The Cruz groves were cleared. The battalion commander had only one request: "Can you teach others to do this?" George agreed on one condition: he kept his rifle. Legacy. John George went on to train America's first true Army sniper units, fought later with Merrill's Marauders in Burma, and documented his experiences in a book that still exists today, Shots Fired in Anger. The Winchester Model 70 that was once mocked as a mail-order rifle now sits in a museum. Most people walk past it without noticing. They don't know it changed the way the U.S. Army viewed individual marksmanship. But now, you do. If this story mattered to you, hit like. It helps these forgotten stories survive. Subscribe if you want more real wartime history. No myths, no Hollywood. And comment where you're watching from. These stories deserve to be remembered.